Now, ECOWAS was founded in 1975 to promote economic integration and cooperation among 15 West African countries. Over the past 50 years, it has worked to make it easier for goods and people to move across borders and has also played a key role in maintaining regional peace and stability. However, ECOWAS still faces major challenges and many of its policies are slow to take effect due to political differences and uneven economic development among member states. Plans like creating a single regional currency have also been delayed. Now, as ECOWAS marks 50 years of progress and a few setbacks, one has to wonder, can true regional integration be achieved without stronger political will and trust among its member states? Today, I'm joined by Dr. Sam Amadi, Director, the Abuja School of Social and Political Thoughts in Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Amadi.
Thank you very much.
All right, so now let's begin with some of ECOWAS's projects, especially the long-delayed ECO single currency, which was billed as a linchpin for deeper integration. Now, what are your thoughts on ECOWAS turning 50? And also, do you think that the bloc can ever afford to go forward with this particular initiative?
Well, first, there's no fait accompli about what ECOWAS can do or not do. It depends on the dynamics in the subcontinent, the level of political leadership, and in the past, ECOWAS has done well in terms of building consensus on protecting the sovereignty of ECOWAS countries, issues around peacekeeping, common migration policies, open border, curtailing military incursion. So those were issues that ECOWAS has arguably had very strong posting across regional bodies in the world. But I think they have failed in building common economic institutions, creating more intra-sub-regional trade. And then the issue of a common currency has been a problem because of obvious challenges between Anglo and Franco West Africa.
Yeah.
Today, with complications around some of the countries that have decided to perhaps citizenship with the ECOWAS as a body, I talk of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, from some kind of confederacy, and the return of the major powers politics, where Russia, China, US, and the West as a whole have to see the West African sub-region as a continent for power play. Arguably, one could say that maybe ECOWAS will struggle now to develop the level of consensus and integration required to finalize movement towards a common currency. And some may even argue that perhaps that may no longer be the most pressing challenge now in the context of the disruptions we witnessed in the last 2 or 3 years. And they need to strike some kind of institutional convergence and either return the three countries back to the fold or develop a more strategic way of engaging them. So that could be more priority, some would argue, in the context of where we are now.
We will definitely be talking more on that, but then let's touch on, ECOWAS's free movement protocol that is meant to guarantee visa-free travel. Yet we see many citizens still face hurdles when they're moving from border to border. What can be done? Do you think that stronger enforcement or incentives should be applied to hold member states accountable?
Well, I think the biggest challenge for ECOWAS free trade, free movement, of course, free trade, is geography, is logistics, is road condition, is facility for ease of movement. So that's even a constraint. If we talk about custom union, talk about visas, and talk about protocols for entry. I think the fact that movement across West Africa is actually constrained and expensive compared with air travel, for example. I mean, look at how difficult it is to move to some of the West African countries. We probably have several stops, increasing costs, delays. I think we need to, the time we're talking about the the superhighway, the ECOWAS, the roads, we've not done a lot in terms of bridging that. ECOWAS is small, natural adjunct regions that should have seamless travel. So the logistical aspect of it, the fact that you can't even hop into the plane and land in one of the West African countries without going through several routes is a challenge. But again, in terms of countries, perhaps I take for example the ECOWAS passport, which is supposed to be a facility for ease of movement. Many countries no longer recognize, in West Africa, no longer recognize those passports for visa free. They require you to have either the Nigerian passport, for example, not the ECOWAS passport. So entry into something even as close as Freetown, without the Nigerian passport, with only the ECOWAS passport, you don't have ease of entry. So I think that the two-dimensional, one is the natural infrastructural problem, the lack of ease of transport. There's road network, the rail network that will facilitate movement. The other one is the policy side of it, the custom protocols in terms of recognitions, in terms of papers and documentations.
Okay.
That sometimes,
All right, Dr. Amadi. Now, now let's go back to the three countries that have actually left ECOWAS. We talk about political crisis in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, which has also reshaped the bloc, right? Is ECOWAS's current summit structure agile enough to manage, fast-moving upheavals, looking at, their exit, especially when their withdrawal actually peeled off 76 million people from a bloc of 446 million?
If you look at the number and the GDP of those who have moved, not too significant, or at least, it doesn't really rock the boat. But look, the significance is that they have strategic value. Think around the terrorism, fight against terrorism and against insecurity in the West African, the Sahel, the Gulf of Guinea and all that. It's going to be big success that these three critical states probably are no longer with us on the same level, and they're going to require multi-diplomatic layering for Nigeria to talk to Burkina Faso or Mali or Niger on issue of security. So that's the first challenge we're going to see. Yes, in terms of population, significant but not overwhelming. But the key point here for us and for those who watch this sector is, what does this mean in terms of the de-democratization? So we are seeing now, like the Nigerian National Security Advisor mentioned, I think a few days ago, we've seen that there's a collapse of democracy across our neighbors. The region is losing. In fact, since 2020, there have been several coups around West Africa. So this exit, the structure, it's a question around whether ECOWAS is providing value for leaders in West African countries, especially Francophone countries that feel perhaps, kind of overwhelmed. The history has been one of torture, rebellion, anger at France overreaching, intervention in the region. So have we seen ECOWAS live up to the expectation, the authenticity, the cry for real freedom? Is the ECOWAS print structure and the leadership able to assure these countries that ECOWAS would, find itself?
Okay, well, speaking of these countries, like you mentioned, Frank, critics have actually said that sometimes ECOWAS speaks with too many voices. The fact that, France, the US, China are all external powers interested in, Africa, especially in West Africa. Do you think that a stronger, empowered commission, would help cut through some of these political gridlock?
Yes, I think that, look, if you have strong leadership, and again, you have to say, do we need a conservative or a revolutionary or radical leadership? If ECOWAS is able to first, you can't build strong leadership without building an economy. The ECOWAS probably the poorest sub-region in the world, one of the poorest. So you are a kind of a mendicant country, continent, a subcontinent, where you are actually living on foreign aids mostly. These countries are weak. And again, you don't have good democracies. You don't have strong leadership internally. So if ECOWAS is able to, grow the economy, number one, is very important for quality international regional politics. Secondly, increase their GDP, increase their bargaining power, and create leadership in their country and the subcontinent that is radical, supported by the people, and able to galvanize and then articulate a common West African idea of the emerging world. Today, the world is at a juncture where we're trying to kind of conceptualize the idea of international liberalism or liberal internationalism, idea of multilateralism. How does West Africa conceive itself, and how can we create a common consensus so that these countries, whether Franco or Agro, whether they came from France or British, will find a common cover and know that the ECOWAS exists to articulate and robustly protect those interests. I think that's where the problem started. I think there's a level of disunity. If you look at what happened with Africa when the Americans wanted to bring the African command in Africa, and Nigeria rejected, Djibouti accepted. Different countries. Look at different things that come, hitting West Africa. One country says no, the other country accepts. So that lack of unity of purpose arising from the failure of leadership to concretize a common ideology that pertains to common salvation, and for the subcontinent is the reason why these other countries don't feel kind of any urgency to stay in this union and to advance its strategic goals. So I think that the West African state is difficult because very poor, low GDP, low coherence internally, weak democracies, very fractious politics, and oftentimes illegitimate leadership, not able to galvanize the people and not able to confront a very hostile global community. Okay.
Now, just before we let you go, analysts have actually warned that ECOWAS suffers from a legitimacy crisis, because they're seen as serving leaders more than citizens. And when we talk about leaders, you know who I'm talking about, the likes of France, and the rest. And that is an accusation that has been brought to the fore by those three countries that have left Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. What democratic reforms or outreach initiatives can rebuild trust with the West African public?
Absolutely correct. I think the major crisis in West Africa is lack of legitimacy, arising from a very hollow and failed democratic project. In the 90s, late 1980s, early 1990s, when we started having the third wave of democracy with the Benin Republic, they had this great conference that ultimately removed the leader, and then Nigeria has, with Abuja in 1993, 1995, we saw a period where West Africa came under democratic wave. But now, that democracy failed. It didn't result in good economic governance, it didn't result in legitimate governance, it didn't result in electoral process. So I think the first thing to do is West Africa has to develop a clarity around democracy. Obasanjo has said, American leaders, democracy is not native to us, it's alien. But the problem is not democracy as a concept. The problem is how we have institutionalized it. So there's need now to create that urgency to redefine democracy, to sit with our culture, but democracy that empowers, democracy that does not create an authoritarian norm. So today, most West African countries are classified, whether they vend them report as electoral autocracy. So they're not even democracy. So we need to really become democracy, give back people as one. Two, some ethnic conflicts is too many, religious conflicts. The West African countries have failed to manage its diversity and pluralism. They have failed to address, standardize a norm that gives each citizen of their country, no matter their diversity of ethnic or religious identities, a sense of common citizenship. So we have to have common citizenship, and that will remove the conflict tendency. West Africa is too conflict prone. Communal conflicts, ethnic conflicts, religious conflicts, and then when you move away from conflict, then you begin to look at production of goods and services, that this continent has to increase its GDP contribution, increase its global trade contribution, and therefore it becomes a continent that can provide for itself and then restore a sense of value. I think we are at a point now where if we don't deal quickly with the political crisis, leading to conflict crisis, leading to poverty trap, we get back to a vicious circle. And that's the problem with West Africa. It's nearing a collapse stage. We need to restore back democracy, restore good governance, restore, a prime democracy that gives everybody a sense of citizenship, and then we get back to economic development, and that will help us to fight
in general, you would love to see ECOWAS leaders, come up with one particular initiative. It could be concrete timelines, budget reallocations, or even institutional reforms, that would take them through the next 50 years.
They should have the idea of a West African democracy that's just like the Scandinavian, based integrated with our culture, based on common citizenship, common identity, and then build a infrastructure.
Translate to shared prosperity for every ECOWAS member.
And capable of producing sustainable economic growth. But that's really important for long-term survival.
All right, Dr. Amadi. Well, thank you so much for your thoughts on this particular topic. We appreciate you for your time. We just spoke to Dr. Sam Amadi, Director, the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought in Abuja, Nigeria.